Hello, welcome back to our second episode of Chapter and Verse, where we sit down and discuss the goings-ons of the world and literature with writers, authors, playwrights, screenwriters, etc. Today, I have the honor of sitting with Janea West, writer and producer of the show hit series Grown. Janea, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So good today, actually. Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time to to join us to discuss your your web series, and maybe we'll talk about some of your future projects as we get to the end of the show. But just to start off, how did you start your writing career? You've had you've been honored by the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, by Black Girls Rock Film Festivals, and most recently with the artist residency at Château de Orcovo in France. So how did you get your beginnings? What made you want to start writing?
I feel like a writer is, I was always a writer since birth. Like all of us probably can relate to that. I'm just writing stories from an early age, but screenwriting specifically, I didn't really know that was a thing until I was working at this job called C-SPAN. If you know C-SPAN, it's like a public affairs network. And I remember I really wanted to pitch a show that was like for young people, because if you know C-SPAN, it's like, with love, it's kind of for the older generations in terms of, it's very much just like House and Senate, nothing that really is designated for young people unless they just choose to be interested in that kind of type of work. Basically, me working at C-SPAN and having this opportunity to potentially pitch like a series that was like designated for young people was something that I was really interested in, and they shut me down very quickly. They were like, no, you're C-SPAN. We stick to the script, which is what we've been doing for the past, 60 years. And so that was like the catalyst for me wanting to like write my own show. Like, okay, well, what if I were to develop something that was like for young people to that like kind of showcase some kind of essence of the political landscape that was interesting, entertaining, but still like informative in some way. And so that's what was the beginning of me like writing Grown, literally, and then also just like my writing career as a screenwriter.
I love that. And you sort of briefly mentioned that you wanted to gear this show Grown towards young people, and the marketing for your show, your social media, you advertise the show as being about 4 young Black women trying to figure ish out. What are some of the challenges that you wanted to highlight in the show, and why did you specifically want to highlight this, that mid to late 20s period as opposed to other pivotal moments in youth?
Well, it definitely reflected like my life at the time. Like I wanted to showcase like that mid-20s because that's how old I was when I started writing it, and just like that uncertainty of like career and relationships and sexuality. And so like all of those questions that I was having then, I just like put into the show. So that was like why I chose like mid-20s. But yeah, I think for me, I really wanted the series to just be like something that anyone potentially could relate to in some way or another. And that's why I love like the idea of like 4 friends, because, one of the friends are going to have something that's, probably relatable. Either it's housing. That was like one of the characters like storylines, like trying to figure out a housing situation because housing is so expensive. Another one is like trying to get a job in the industry that's like almost impossible to break into. Being an artist was, as an artist, I feel like you always are trying to like, build your career, and yet it feels like it's so difficult to break in. So, I feel like that's redundant. One is like a politician trying to break into like the political world, and another one's an artist trying to like really showcase her work. And yeah, there's like a journalist who has a hard time like speaking out and, speaking her mind because of just like corporate America. So I just felt like each storyline, I could relate to it, or like people that I knew were like kind of going through it, or just like reading blogs back in the day of like what other people were going through. So yeah, I wanted to just create something that people could enjoy and see themselves in.
I think that's one of the notable things about the show. I've shown it to multiple people since I first sort of came across it. In my personal watching, I felt the most compelled by Najae's storyline, partly because we spent narrative time with her, as opposed to the other three. Did you envision any of the four main characters you have as a main character, or do you see them as sharing the stage equally?
I mean, definitely, I agree. Najae does have like the main storyline. She was the first character I wrote that I felt like, oh yeah, this is like specifically because she wanted to work in politics. And as someone who was like pitching, I mean, I wasn't pitching it to anyone except myself at this point, but a character who wanted to work on Capitol Hill, like that was like how the story kind of spawns. And then from there, just building out the characters around them. But I definitely think like Najae and Jean are totally like the two central characters. Whereas Simone and Sasha, they obviously overlap and they have their own storylines. And A Dream World was like, okay, season one is like Najae's storyline, but like if I was to continue building seasons, it would be like season two would be like locked in with Jean and then Sasha and Simone. So that was kind of how I imagined it. Obviously, we just have one season. I think I did the best that I could to like, get every character an episode.
Right.
And showcase a little bit of their lives, but it's like you only have X amount of dollars and X amount of time and all the above to really execute. But yeah, so yeah, Najee is definitely the main character. But I feel like Jean, low key, to me, Jean is actually the main character. She's the one that holds it down, like she has the fort, the house that everyone lives in, and I feel like she's the one who, yeah, without her, like I think Najee gives main, but like I think Jean is really the glue.
I think, well, one, I want to sort of give the audience a sort of preview into the landscape of the characters. Could you take a moment and sort of give us a brief intro to each of the four and their sort of, the sort of virtues and flaws?
Absolutely. Okay, well, starting off with Najae. Najae is like the politician. Granted, she's unemployed, doesn't have a job, and she's never worked in politics before, but she's like very like ambitious and optimistic, but very naive. Her storyline talks about this guy that she's dating or not really dating. And she's also, I would say, like self-centered in ways. And I think that's the biggest issue throughout the series is that, or season one at least, she's constantly like choosing herself over her friends and like, yeah, just like really like self-centered in that way. And so it's interesting because politicians tend to have like that, it's all, even though politicians are supposed to be for the people, it's like they ultimately, a lot of the times politicians can be self-serving. And so I feel like that was kind of what I was building Najae to be. But obviously if you watch the full season, she has like, a full realization about herself, I guess. But yeah, then you have Jean. Jean is the artist. She's really trying to get her work recognized, but also while doing so, she's experiencing some questions around her sexuality. And I think that's really fun to play with because at the time, actually, when I was writing the series, or maybe a little bit after, I mean, I my own sexuality, I was like, just kind of unpacking in that time period. So it was a fun way to just kind of explore my own. But yeah, I would say her downfall is that her positive is that she's such a great friend. She really is the one who like will let you, live on her couch or in her room, take up half the house. But I think it's like she's a people pleaser, and because of that, she doesn't know how to say no and then becomes passive aggressive. And so I feel like that's like a flaw that we see in the series is her struggle with communication and setting boundaries for herself. And then you have Sasha, and Sasha's like the fun one to write because she's so carefree and just like, social butterfly. And it just seems to like live a life that just doesn't have, like any real worries in the world. She is like the sugar baby that gives no sugar to the character that she's, dating. But yeah, ultimately she like ends up struggling because of that, like her decisions. And so I feel like her downfall is that like she's like kind of lost. She doesn't really know like what she's doing in life. And I don't know, like I don't really get to explore it too much in the season, but she ultimately is like, yeah, like that's something that like she might have like a really easy life and she seems like she's like whimsical or whatever, but she doesn't really know what she's doing. And I think that can be, it's interesting to see like just, yeah, I think that's living in Los Angeles now, I feel like there's so many of us who could probably relate to that. But anyways, and then lastly, we have Simone, and Simone's very serious. You know, she's very like motherly in ways, like takes care of like her, you know, everyone, like her brother, and then like she's just like always has like the advice to give. But I feel like Simone just like struggles with just like vulnerability,
Hmm.
and just speaking like, I mean, speaking her truth, specifically like as a writer. So yeah, I love watching the series back. There's parts of me that's just like, oh, I wish I developed more of this, or I got to still, you know. But that's what I'm excited about in the future. Is like as I continue to develop storylines and just to write in general. It's like I can do that with new characters or old characters. Who knows? Yeah.
One of the things that I thought about while watching, because you have one character who is, as you said, in this sort of sugar baby situation. You have another who's reckoning with her sexuality, and all of the characters are like deeply flawed in certain ways. Like none of them are completely whole, and they're all striving. And sometimes this can be a little bit taboo, especially because you have a cast of all Black women. What did it feel like, or what motivated you to feel confident enough to put out, four characters of your own creation who are going to be viewed, are going to be judged? Um, what sort of empowered you to sort of have the freedom to create these characters who aren't polished, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that was like the best part was that like as I think as Black women, as just like women, like however, I think there's this like belief that we have to be perfect, and not even just this belief, like this expectation actually, that we have to be perfect and we have to like always, look a certain way or have our hair done or whatever it is, have our shit together. And so I think like I wanted to create characters who not necessarily messy, but just like exemplified who like ultimate who we are is, which is that like sometimes we're amazing and have all these positive traits, and at the
Mm-hmm.
same time we also can be deeply flawed, and I think that's what makes us human. And so yeah, it was really fun to create, but then also the actors who like portray these characters, they brought them to life and were able to like add in their own characteristics and stuff. So I think I think that's what's really important actually, is to like not have perfection on screen, because that to me feels not real.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it's very freeing to create these characters.
There's always that moment, I feel, as a writer, where you set out to make a project, you have a vision, and you go about making that vision, and then there's a moment where you realize, oh, I'm actually making something else. Were there
Mm.
any moments where you felt like, oh, Grown is becoming a little bit more, a little bit different than the original project as you imagined it?
I'm sure, because we definitely had a bunch of reshoots. Like there'd be
Hmm.
times where I'm like, oh, this is definitely the story, and then we'd like shoot it, watch it back, edit it, watch it back, and be like, So for sure, but I think like I don't know. It's funny because I totally was imagining the series is like all about friendship, and showcasing friends. And then I watch it back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like these are actually like not the healthiest
Yeah.
relationships, honestly. And to me, like, I, that was, I mean, in some ways refreshing, because funny enough, like, as I was writing the series, I was experiencing like these friendships that also helped me produce the series. And we like I was writing kind of live, like I was
Hmm.
Jean in the show in many ways. I was in many ways Najae, but like many ways Sasha, like all the characters, obviously Simone writer, but like point is that like I like had friends living with me in that studio apartment that you watched. And so like, I think like I was like creating obviously storylines that weren't exactly what was happening in this, in
Right.
the show. But I just feel like when I watch it back, like I think that it kind of showcases how friends can stop being friends, because you see these like cycles that are ultimately unhealthy and toxic. And like, yeah, so it's funny, I like created a show that was like all about friendship, and now when I watch it back, I'm just like, were they even friends? And
Mhm.
I think that's what I also kind of about the previous question about these perfect humans is like, or creating imperfect characters is like, I think friendships aren't perfect. But I ultimately see like how in real life, how some of my friendships kind of faded because of like the issues that we had on screen or that we saw on screen, even if it wasn't exactly what's happening. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it
I
totally
feel like,
does.
yeah.
Let's get into. I kind of want to dig deeper into that, like your process of self-realization and creativity alongside the show. One of the things that's really interesting is, we had our little intro and we put you as writer and producer, but I believe it's episode 3. You actually make a little cameo inside of your own work as the character Renee. What did it feel like to wear so many different hats with one project, to have to sort of switch gears? And what did you learn in that process of participating in something that you've written in such a literal way?
I mean, I recognize that I'm type A when it comes to creativity or like execution. Is like I can be, I wouldn't say controlling, but like I think like having so many hats like it's probably because I was like I have to do it, and then I learned like you actually don't have to do everything, like this is what you have a team for. And so that was something that I had to grow in, was like being able to like relinquish and believe like, it doesn't have to be me. Other people can execute and be excellent. And so yeah, that was a growing experience, growing pain, I'm sure, for others. But so yeah, I think like it was fun wearing so many hats, but also like I barely slept, or like I had no social life, like I think there was a lot of sacrifices I made to wear all these hats. And I think like, yeah, like it was so fun, but it's like, I don't know, on my next projects, I'm excited to have like to like release a lot of that control that I felt like I had to, do on my own, because I didn't. But either way, acting was scary. I did not. I specifically was, writer producer, for a reason. Like I had the choice potentially to be like the Najae character, just because like, in many ways she was inspired from my life. But I remember like just feeling so nervous being in front of the camera. And like, yeah, so my Renee role was fun. I had a little cameo, but I definitely, especially then, don't think I was ready to like be confident in front of the camera the way that like Najae, the actress who played Najae, was able to. I think she did a great job. So yeah, I think moving forward, like in the future, I definitely want to be more like on camera. I think that could be fun. But I don't think when I was producing Grown, like between being the writer, the producer, like XYZ, other roles, like I think it would have been too overwhelming for me to then also try to like manage being an actress, like a main character.
Right.
I think it would have been like too many voices literally in my head that would have, who knows how the show would have came out because of that. So yeah.
I want to jump back to something you actually said in the previous question. And, you said that when you set out to make Grown, you wanted it to be this story about friendships, and it ended up being, about about how far a friendship can stretch. When you think about your audience, members of the Lenox and Parker community who might watch this and sort of, go watch Grown, the web series, as well as people who might want to rewatch. What are some other things that you want people to sort of take away from Grown? What are some things, lessons from different storylines that you feel as though are sort of integral to the show's, what it stands for?
Don't text your ex.
That's actually a big one.
Yeah, it's like I feel like that was again another storyline that like was something that I wasn't going through in the exact moment, but like
Right.
I think just as being young and wanting to like feel seen and loved, we like might choose relationships that are so clearly not for us. And I think that was like a really big just a story that was something that I definitely saw watching back and was just like, ooh, like I'm glad the character made those choices ultimately for, her own growth. But like I'm just like, yeah, totally. That was something that I wouldn't recommend to text the next or whatever, or to go back.
I think Don't Text the Next is actually a really good one, but continue.
Yeah, I think also just like in general, like I'm thinking of Sasha's character, but like, I feel like since Grown, like I there's been so much growth personally when it comes to just like codependency and like depending on others versus self. And I feel like all of the characters in some way or another probably like lean too heavily on others, which is what friendship is all about. But ultimately, like specifically with dating, I think like, you know, Sasha and her Ron situation or whatever, like I think like having your own firm ground to stand on and then kind of allowing, you know, other people to come into it is really important. And I feel like that was something that, yeah, I see the characters made different choices and I'm happy again that they chose the storylines that they did or whatever. But I got definitely watching back. I'm like, ooh, yeah, like people watching, it's like codependency, you know, especially with men, not it, you know,
Right.
but yeah.
No, that's real. And I think like, as you said, you know, the characters are in that period where they don't, you know, they don't know what they don't know. You know, it's been a while since you've actually, you know, completed Grown the web series. It's been honored at these film festivals. You had the residencies. What are some future projects that we can sort of look out that we should expect from you? What are you? Do you think you'd continue on with Grown? Are you looking to expand into different types of characters? What does the world look like for Janea West?
I mean, yeah, it's actually a very exciting question. As you know, Stone, I've been working on like a TV version of Grown, which I'm really excited about. It's funny because the characters are essentially like based off of these like archetypes that I've created with Grown, but I got a great feedback when Grown first came out, which is like, you know, what's the story? And I think that was like granted Grown was like about, you know, maybe friendship or the antithesis of friendship and like self-discovery and all these aspects that like are important, but like what is like the driving force that's gonna like, you know, keep the series going. And so that's what I've been really working on is like a series that, you know, is still based in DC, still has these four friends who are treating each other better, still having, you know, conflict as every relationship may, but like having a kind of a driving force with the story. So I'm working on that, which I'm really excited about. And I think with this like resurgence of Grown, like I'm actually really excited to see how Grown connects the dots for the TV show. Yeah, that's exciting what I'm anticipating there. But I think as a writer, like I write, you know, the worlds that I live in. And so there is a series I'm developing that's based in LA that is based at this restaurant that I work at, actually, that is like so funny. And I'm actually like working on the second draft of it right now. And I plan on producing that just for myself. Like, I feel like, you know, of course I believe that the series is like strong enough to make it all the way to like, you know, a network. But I'm also just like releasing a lot of the expectations and anxiety around like, oh my God, it has to be, you know, I'm just like creating because like, that's what I want to do. And I think that is what I felt with Grown was like, I wasn't creating Grown to like make it a TV show or to make it this like, you know, to make it, when I say make it a TV show, I mean like make it on air. I just was creating it because it's like that's what I think creators do. They just want to create the work that they are creating. And so similarly with the series that I'm working on in Los Angeles, that's like something that I'm really excited about. And then I'm also working on this like series that's it's like I guess you can consider it a TikTok show, but it's actually so funny. It's like Sex and the City, but it's actually someone who's not having any sex. So it's really it's a comical and not based on my life, but low key, you know, inspired by, which most things are. So yeah, those are some projects I'm working on currently.
One of the things I like to think about when I'm reading or watching any content is how things fit into larger conversations in genre and the canon, etc. And when I watched The Grown, I thought of things that of Black sitcoms and dramedies, like Living Single and A Different World, just with that sort of coming of age element that Grown has accompanying it.
Yeah.
What do you think What do you think Grown does that sort of is in conversation with other sort of, you know, Black sitcoms and dramedies? Like, how is it sort of similar in terms of things you might have seen before? And more importantly, what do you think sets it apart? What do you think makes it different?
That's a fun question. I mean, I think the similarities, of course, are just like friendship, 20s, like coming of age, all the like themes of like dating and self-discovery. So I feel like that's what brings it to like relate to these shows, which honestly, Living Single is like the series that when I first was starting to write Grown, I was like, that was like it was one of my favorite shows growing up, and that's kind of what also inspired me to like make a series. But I think what sets it apart, I mean, for sure, just like the landscape of DC. I do want, like, DC is kind of like the fifth character in the series, and it's funny watching it back. It's like I have my own thoughts about like it's fun. But I was gonna say I definitely want the series to like it has this playful aspect to it, and I didn't really get into it too much with the political landscape or the like lens, but I do want ultimately to like have little moments of like what's happening in like the world and create almost like a blueprint of like ways to like create some kind of impact, whether it's like, for instance, like I mean, I don't know, Mamdani, like in New York, like I feel like it would be cool to like have a character who without being too on the nose or cheesy, but like how does one create a really successful campaign? Like what are what's necessary, or like what's actually happening in DC, because DC is such a paradigm for the rest of the country. So it's like whatever is happening in DC, like with homelessness or lack of education or food deserts, like usually you see it everywhere else. And so like I feel like there's something there where it offers conversation of like, yeah, like it's a show about like friendship and like fun, whatever, but like how can we like also ground it and like what's actually happening and use that as like a way to, like I said, create change, which might be kind of cheesy, but I think like that ultimately is like what art in ways like supposed to do, like at least like showcase like the times. And so yeah, that's what I would want Grown to do.
Some cheese is good, and I do think when I think back on my own experience watching the show, I had like great admiration for the ways in which it was a deeply funny and deeply relatable show, and it dipped into these moments of political dialogue or commentary without necessarily feeling like it. Like it truly was just a true to life show where the personal and political became so enmeshed that it never felt like it was preaching down to its audience. So that, I think that was very well done. All right, so I guess our last question, really more of an opportunity. I love to give the Lenox and Parker community chances to support our writers and artists who come in. So if you could take a moment just to tell us how we can support you, where we can follow it, where we can sort of keep up with things you do in the future. I think that might be a great way for us to end off.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the web series is called Grow on the Web Series. You can go out to on Instagram. I'm like relaunching and marketing it, so you'll get to be in the know, and episodes will be dropping on a weekly basis. So yeah, so go check us out on Grow on the Web Series, and then from there, if you want to follow my personal page, you can do that. But also on TikTok, Effortlessly Frazzled is like where I'll be launching my like TikTok series, which is gonna be funny. Okay, it's gonna be like Sex in the City meets Girlfriends meets Janea West. So yeah, that's where you can follow, and you'll see everything else that I kind of create from that page too.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you for coming on the show, Janea. To the Lenox and Parker audience, please go watch Grow on the Web Series. It is an amazing show. I just in prep for this interview, I attempted to watch just one episode at a time. I ended up binging the entire show at once. So maybe consume it in a healthier way. But yeah, no, go watch. Great show. Janea, thank you once again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Stone.